Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to the November meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Osborne, Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and is being live streamed via YouTube. And apologies if anybody come on 30 seconds earlier whilst we was having a bit of a laugh. And it will be available afterwards on our website. Excuse me. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phones onto silent if they have one near them and to mute their microphones when not speaking. This will reduce feedback and background noise and saves bandwidth and prevent loss of connection. If you are a member of the committee, please leave your camera on.
Paul, you're not very audible.
I will first do a roll call of members to check that who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm that you are connected. Members of the committee as follows: Councillor Barnes.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Present.
Councillor Cortell.
Present.
Councillor Drayson.
Present.
Chairman of Council. Councillor Earl Williams.
Present.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor Madeley.
Present.
Councillor Maynard.
Present.
And Councillor Mooney.
Present.
Thank you. Other members joining this meeting this evening are Councillor Byrne, Councillor Coleman, Councillor Dixon. Present. Councillor Langlands, Councillor Madeley, and Councillor Stevens. If there's anyone I've left off, then...
Yes, Paul, Mary Bonds.
Thank you, Mary.
Councillor Tempe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Madeley was mentioned twice. I was on the first list and the additional list.
Are you acting as a substitute?
No, I'm a member of the Overview and Scrutiny.
Okay, I'll take that up with the secretary. I've done that bit. Yeah, please indicate in chat if you wish to speak. Officers joining us this evening are Malcolm Johnson, Chief Executive.
Present, Chairman.
Robin Bernard, Assistant Director of Resources.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Tim Hicklin, Head of Service Strategy and Planning. We got Tim.
I don't think he's here, Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Ben, you're here.
I am. Present, Chair.
Thank you. Richard Parker Hardy. I'm sure
Present.
I see you as well. Yep. Joe Powell.
Good evening.
Thank you. And Democratic Services Officer this evening and Committee Clerk today is Louise Hollingsworth. Sure.
Present.
I know it's here. Thank you. Members of the committee will be making the decisions today by named vote. Because of the new format, members are encouraged to make their comments succinct and pertinent and to ensure the smooth reign of the meeting. Those members who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only into the chat facility. I will ask members who have asked a question if they wish to come back after receiving a response, so there's no need to retype your name into the chat facility again. It's a requirement that all members who would have read the paperwork published on the website. Members are reminded not to press leave meeting. If you need to leave the room, just turn off your camera and microphone. Each item will be reintroduced as we get to it. So there we are. So agenda item 1, resolved that the minutes of the last meeting held on the 19th of October 2020 to have your authorisation to sign those at a later date as a correct record of the proceedings.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take that as carried to make life easy. Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutes. I have Councillor Errington who has apologised. Are there any more, Louise?
No, none received, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Agenda items, additional agenda items, 3. Malcolm, I assume there's none.
No, there are no additional agenda items, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 4, disclosures of interest. Do any members have any personal, disclosable, pecuniary interest in matters on the agenda? The nature of the interest and whether the member regards it personal or prejudicial under the terms of code of conduct. Members are reminded to need to repeat their declarations.
Sorry, Chairman. Ought we to declare our non-executive directorships of Alliance Buildings, the new company?
Yeah, Malcolm, view on that, please.
Chairman, if it's considered to be relevant to the report, I mean, I think the report is not dealing with the specifics of the company, so I would, if members feel comfortable with that, but it's already on those members' direct declaration of interest that are relevant. So I would suggest that unless there's a specific topic or something, absolutely relating to Alliance Homes rather comes up, that just can be noted. Okay.
I think that's probably the best way forward. Item 5, community grant scheme. You'll remember we gave a grant of almost £30,000 to the Pelham Charitable Incorporated organisation. So we have in your papers an update from them, well, not from them per se, but from Ben. Ben, do you wish to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, not an awful lot to introduce here. I mean, I think the Pelham have provided the main report, Appendix 1, which is their sort of feedback to council. I would say obviously there's with COVID-19 there's been a significant impact on their ability to utilise the venue at the Pelham. That doesn't mean to say that they haven't been busy. The Pelham as an organisation were instrumental, along with the Beats groups, in supporting vulnerable people throughout Bexhill during the first wave and the first lockdown from COVID. So it's a matter for members of the committee to discuss should they wish.
Okay, I've had a read up. I did have a read up on this, and I would say one thing: it looks pretty good. And if you were sort of local to Sidley and you wanted a small wedding, probably next year, you could have a bargain wedding in what looks like a really nice venue, and they do food for £5 a head. So that looks really excellent. I see Polly, Councillor Gray, you wish to make a comment?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just as one of the very lucky councillors to have the Pelham within my ward, I just want to reinforce what wonderful work they do and how very lucky we are to have this community resource. They do wonderful work. They've kept going through all the COVID-19 restrictions, and I just can't say how pleased we are to have them. They are even better than the presentation here. They are brilliant. And so a big thank you to Pelham. And I'm sure Chris Madeley will join me in that as my fellow councillor.
Okay. Councillor Madeley, as it's your patch, do you wish to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I definitely concur with everything that Councillor Gray has said. And we were fortunate the other day with being taken round by Ollie, who manages it. And it really is an amazing place. And it's going to be even more amazing as we go through once they've got raised the funds, if you like, to be able to do the top floor, which we were also honoured to go and see. Yep, absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful place, wonderful institution altogether. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a little bit offline for me when it's talking about sustainability, but I have a question. When and at what time can it be expected that this will be self-sustainable and wipe its face?
Oh, go on then, Ben.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, it's hard. It's too early to tell now because of the impact of COVID. I think we've got to remember that the Pelham is a community interest organisation. They're not there to make a profit, and they do rely heavily on a whole army of volunteers that support the work that they do. So, in terms of sustainability, it's not necessarily a straightforward answer to that, but needless to say, they're able to grow and shrink in terms of their use of volunteers as and how their resources enable them to do so. So I suppose the more money they can generate, particularly from the venue, then the more activity they can do in the community.
Does that answer your question, Martin?
Yes, Chairman, it does. In fact, what I was particularly worried about, how long could they last doing what they're doing? And that was my, because they do good work, there's no doubt about that. And the place is lovely and well presented. And I was just worried, will it be there for tomorrow and the day after? That's what I was worried about. Thank you.
I would assume so. I would certainly hope so. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to further attest as a member in the nearby ward of Sidley, and it's always been a great shame that the Pelham isn't in Sidley because it's such an incredible place, and I'm sure both Jim and I would love to have it in our ward, but it's just outside. It's in former old Sidley, it's in the bigger Sidley, but just to attest the incredible work that Ollie and the team have done at the Pelham, especially during this pandemic. I've been coordinating the Sidley beat effort, and when Ollie and the team got together and sort of got their volunteers out there to help, it was an absolute godsend. They did so much for the people of Sidley and Old Town and the surrounding areas. And also, I was very pleased, I was talking to Ollie the other day, that they also have plans to renovate their basement to make it an area for young people, where they're going to be holding a youth club for the young people of the area as well. So they do absolutely incredible work, and they're an absolute asset to the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And of course, I think everybody would attest to the fact that this isn't just about residents of Sidley or Old Town using the Pelham. It clearly is of benefit to the whole of Bexhill. And I can remember very, very clearly back in 2018 when we awarded a not insignificant sum of just under £30,000 to the Pelham. That we were very hopeful that not only would it be a valuable community resource, but also that, in fact, it would also be something that would be sustainable into the future. And I think they've got a great management team in there. I'm really pleased to see the report in front of us, and really pleased to see how they've been a part of that response, obviously, to the COVID crisis. And I think that the general point is obviously we would be congratulating the team at the Pelham for what they've done, recognising the fact that we did give them the award that we gave back in 2018 under our administration, but also to say very, very clearly that if they need in the future more support, that the door would be open. The door would be open to any organisation that's got a strong community focus, because that's what the community grant scheme is all about. The only rider I would make to that is that we've given significant awards of similar figures out there in the rural areas, and I don't think I can ever remember seeing a report in front of us reporting back. And if that is going to be something that we're going to do into the future, I don't think that's a bad thing. But quite clearly, if we're talking about, for instance, a community hall, we understand how community halls work. But perhaps through the members' bulletin, where we do give significant sums of money, that's probably the place for these reports to go, because we're not going to be critical of them, of course. I think everything in the report that we see there today is to be warmly congratulated. But I think where we do give, for example, over £10,000 to any community organisation, I think it would be really useful if a year later we had a report. But the place for that report, I think, frankly, isn't on the scrutiny agenda. It's unless it's by exception, there's something, you know, negative to report and their lessons need to be learned. I think the members' bulletin is really the place for that. But, you know, I'd echo the thoughts of other councillors, particularly those in Bexhill. This is an excellent project. You know, it's a former pub that hasn't been converted into residential use. It remains a good community focus, and I think that that's something that perhaps we could see repeated elsewhere in Rother. So I think a useful example of what a good community resource can be when it's properly run. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the reason it is come here is because when we awarded the grant, or I can't quite remember when we awarded the grant, I think we asked for a report back after a year or 18 months or something. I can't remember the actual specifics, but that's probably the reason it's here. Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reiterate what other councillors have said and what Ben Hook has said in terms of commending the Pelham project. I've attended meetings there on behalf of numerous organisations. The first floor looks absolutely fabulous now, and I think for a very small amount of funding, the financial leverage has been superb in supporting a tremendous, an enormous number of volunteers who, if their time were costed in financial terms, would be massive, and therefore the financial return from this is absolutely incredible. I just thought I'd mention that in view of what Councillor Mooney had said.
Thank you. Chief Executive, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think that the comments of members that have been made so far are well made and reflect the situation that's happening there. I think that in terms of what Councillor Mooney asked, I mean, what this money has enabled them to do is expand their operation beyond what they were dealing with before. So it's not so much about sustainability, it's about enabling them to grow as an organisation and actually to develop. And if you haven't been there, it's well worth a visit. I have to say that the leader of the council and I visited early on, and you know, there's still a lot that could be done. But as an organisation, they're very much into sort of growing in a way that they can manage and not growing unsustainably. So I think there's a lot of thought and attention has gone into making sure that they can deal with what they've got at the moment and actually, you know, absorb that little bit of growth. So I think it's I think this is a very positive report. It's been a very good outcome, and I think the council should be very pleased with the fact that it's managed to fund you know, this sort of expansion and activities and allowed those activities to become sustainable. Thank you, Chairman.
Good, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm afraid I do have to disagree with you a bit, Councillor Maynard. I think bringing this report to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has given us all the opportunity to read about how a community hub can work so successfully and may inspire other councillors to support and encourage their own communities to imitate and initiate such a successful scheme. And I would like to recommend that we accept this report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, no problem. Oh,
yeah, I'll put down Councillor Gray as it's your ward. Got a thumbs up. Yeah, I think what sort of Councillor Maynard was sort of getting at was you know, we'd be right in not requiring them to report every year. Is that sort of fair, Ben?
Yeah, that's fair, Chairman. I mean, to be honest with you, we were supposed to report back after 12 months, and it took an extra bit of time after that, you know. So, but I think I think you know, once is probably sufficient at this stage, and then as has been maybe suggested, we can feedback further updates through the members bulletin as and when they occur.
Yeah. Be nice if they could get some local press as well. I'm not sure if they do, but if they get local press in the Bexhill Observer, sort of telling them, you know, if you've got an excellent facility on your doorstep, then got to be good for them. Well, it has been moved and seconded. So I'll just say all in favour on this one. No dissenters.
Agreed, Chairman.
Okay, we'll take that as passed,
Agreed.
Louise, if that's okay. Moving on to agenda item 6. And a background noise, but who it was. Agenda item 6. What do we got here? Improvement purpose of report. Review of housing homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. Joe and Ben. So who wants to go first?
If it's all right with you, Chairman, I'll do the first bit, and then okay. I'm going to drag Joe in to update on his bit as well.
Yep.
So the this is part of the updates to the housing homelessness and rough sleeping strategy that was approved last year. The report gives an outline as to what activity has been undertaken in over that period of time, and the progress that has been made. The strategy itself breaks down pretty simply into 3 main areas. One is increasing supply, one is reducing demand, and then one is improving the existing stock. My own service area is primarily charged with increasing the supply of housing, along with Tim Hickling, Head of Service for Strategy and Planning. The key updates are that we have established the delivery vehicle in terms of Alliance Homes Rother Limited, and we're progressing now 5 housing sites throughout the district. Also within that, there's the Empty Homes Action Plan, which is led by Richard Parker Harding's service, and and then I'll pass over to Joe Powell, Head of Housing and Communities, for an update in Priority 2. The one thing I would say is that in Appendix 1 is the actions within the action plan. Appendix A, sorry, that we have that officers recommend be signed off as completed. Oh no, sorry, that the action. Sorry, Appendix A is the current action plan. Appendix B is the actions that we've completed, and Appendix C is a list of proposed new activity that should be included into the action plan for future years as the next step towards achieving the outcomes that's been set in the strategy. Joe, did you want to move on to your area?
Yes, thanks, Ben. Good evening, everyone. Just to add really to Ben's point on in terms of demand management, which is how we split the strategy up. I wanted just to actually draw attention to my element of the strategy, and just to link it a bit more explicitly with the anti-poverty work that's reporting to this committee as well, just to remind members that a lot of what it's in the council's gift to achieve in regards to poverty sits in housing and housing needs, and alongside Robin Venard's service areas and housing benefit and council tax benefit. So just to give a shout for everything we're achieving in that context, and that the key function of that anti-poverty strategy will be to house some of this housing needs bits of work, but also for us to think more broadly about what we do as a council and coordinate activity around broader anti-poverty objectives. So just to give a couple of highlights, we did temporary accommodation We've purchased 5 properties to date and have households within those now. We now have more households in temporary accommodation within Rother than without, which after a few years of having no temporary accommodation, or many years of having no temporary accommodation in the Rother district is progress indeed in the last few years, and good progress. And all children now are in self-contained accommodation, so not in hotel-like accommodation, which is also a positive progress. There are the odd example of some families in transition to self-contained, but it's a matter of weeks rather than being in there permanently, so that's really positive. The Rother Tenant Finder scheme, just to give that a plug if people don't know about it, it's a scheme offering incentives to private sector landlords, particularly those that are not professional landlords. So any people you know that would like to outsource the responsibility of managing their tenancy and all the rest of it, then do give us a ring. We're always looking for people. That's secured 55 tenancies to date since its inception in October 2019, so that's within just over a year, so that's really positive. Also, the street homelessness progress, I hope members will have observed a marked reduction in street homelessness in principally in Bexhill, but in the other areas of Rother as well in recent years. And we are successfully funding in partnership with the Homelessness Unity Group, which has a lot of involvement from the Pelham actually as well, to run the St Barnabas Safe Space in Bexhill Sea Road, which operates a couple of days a week, and they have an outreach service attached to that as well. And also just a quick plug for the Live, Work, Thrive project that's working now and just started to bring homeless people closer to employment through actual employment, but training and job readiness particularly as well. So yeah, I'll hand it back to Ben, I think. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, I'm just sort of wishing I'd done a bit more plugging, but no, thanks, Joe. So yeah, that's the officer's perspective, Chair. Happy to take any questions. We've got myself, Joe Powell and Richard Parker Harding on hand to answer any questions that you may have. Okay,
before we do that, Richard, anything you wish to add at this stage or not?
Just to add, obviously, as the report says, in terms of private sector housing, we've been inspecting a large number of properties this year, mainly due to the COVID, which meant we had to inspect lots of temporary accommodation to make sure it's fit for putting homeless families into, which means we've exceeded our target there. And obviously, we're progressing with the empty homes plan. And although our sort of direct involvement is reducing the number of empty homes, the other aspect to actually promoting our enforcement function in terms of empty homes is actually reducing the number of empty homes as well as the changes to the council tax ban. So that's all going to plan.
Thank you. Right, I'll go over to members. Councillor Barnes, you were first. I expect you've got a bit of a list.
Chairman, I'm not quite sure how you're going to handle this. This is probably the single most important topic that this scrutiny committee will address this year. I had to say I'm going to make a number of comments, and it may well be at some stage we need to direct our attention to specific pages. There's always a risk when you are going to make constructive criticisms that you forget just how much has been achieved. And so I want to preface my remarks by saying a warm word of congratulations for the enormous amount of work that has been done by the officers and for the achievements that are actually now behind us. And I think we need to congratulate them on that. I have one area, you will remember I was chairman of the Housing Task Force, so I read this with a considerable degree of attention. There was one area that I totally missed, and it relates to a problem which Joe touched on, and it is, of course, what we do about the rising total of people in bed and breakfast accommodation. Joe said perfectly properly that we have bought 5 houses, and I believe we've actually leased a number more. And it gives me great pleasure that we are now housing most people in Rother rather than in Hastings or Eastbourne. All of those are the positive side. But we still have, if you look at it, at the end of Q2, 73 households in temporary accommodation. That's above target. There's no evidence that we're making progress on the numbers of any substantial measure. They are coming down a bit, but we still have a projected overspend. If you turn to page 92 of the agenda, paragraph 14, a projected overspend of 648,000. We asked on the Housing Task Force, and Robin perhaps can comment on this, for a modelling of the savings and additional revenue if we manage to reduce the bed and breakfast budget by building, not simply buying, but adding to the total of number of units by the building of prefabricated housing on council land. There are also a number of purpose-built cabins now that can be adapted for housing, which are on the market. And we have some land behind the town hall. We may have 1 or 2 other sites where we could actually do that prefabricated housing. The advantage being that we not only reduce expenditure, but insofar as we actually produce any rental income at all from these places, it would actually operate on the plus side and on the bottom side. It's an argument I'll come back to when suggesting other things that we might build. But on homelessness, it seems to me we've still got a bed and breakfast problem. It's better than it was. The number of weeks people spend in there are less. But if we actually bought from one of these prefabricated housing supply companies and put it up on our own land, we might be able to eliminate the overspend altogether.
Thank you. Is that it, Councillor Barnes, or was there others? I'm not. Do we want an answer to that from Ben? Can you offer an answer to that? Joe?
I think it would probably be more my area, but happy. Ben.
No, Joe, you crack on.
Yeah, regarding the TA, I think that it's a very, I support much of what you said, Councillor Barnes, and there is absolutely huge challenges ahead of us in terms of homelessness. And the main challenge we have is that while we're tasked with dealing with many of the symptoms of homelessness, we're not blessed with the control of the levers which cause it, which are manifold and complex. And I think I would point to the number of people in temporary accommodation prior to the COVID outbreak, which was down to 50 households, 55 households. And I think that's significant improvements on the 80, 90 odd we were at in a sort of 2017 sort of time. So we have made some progress to that end. And I've said before in these forums, I think that really one of the opportunities absolutely is to reduce the number, but there is another option of trying to move away from a temporary accommodation model towards a supported accommodation model where people are actually invested in and provided with the skills and expertise they need to live permanently, which is often the consistent problem or challenge between those households, is that they have manifestly and demonstrably failed to manage a tenancy very often independently. The overspend, I was just rapidly looking at the figures because that figure has come down somewhat since the Q1 projections, and the actual, I think, in terms of a variance is improving. But it's again a very challenging situation, largely brought about by the increase in COVID. And just to reassure you, as a proportion, the increase in outturn is as a percentage is roughly in line with the increase in the quantum of households in TA. So it's almost directly proportional, is what I mean. So that is a frustration. But yeah, absolutely. Look, prefabricated housing, that shipping container model or the like is absolutely, we're all ears. There are challenges in terms of the delivery of that sort of housing that Ben and I, are variously discussing in various forms behind the scenes. But there are the challenges associated with the delivery of that sort of housing may not be immediately apparent, but it is something on our list of options. Absolutely.
Chairman, could I ask, therefore, that we do actually put in our recommendations to Cabinet that this is urgently investigated? I agree with Ben, the longer term solution is important. I'm a staunch supporter of what he's doing around supported housing, which is addressing what I would call the really problem end. But we also have people who come out of the private sector, and before we can find them accommodation, we have to accommodate them. It seems to me, if we could ask for the supply of prefabricated housing and possible sites to be investigated as a matter of urgency, because if we could staunch that hole in the budget, we wouldn't have to make other cuts, which we may face in years, in the next 2 or 3 years. So it seems to me there's a degree of urgency there to get that under control. And I have to say, with firms available as near as Newhaven that can supply these things, and with a site behind the town hall, I would hope we can at least put some measure in train fairly fast.
Thank you. I'm sure that that Ben and Joe have listened or are on board with you there, John. Councillor Byrne, you're the portfolio holder.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, looking at the recommendations, there's something very, very heartening in there. It says, Cabinet be requested to agree that the targets achieved as listed in Appendix B be removed and replaced with those in Appendix C. And you might see that Appendix C is far more action focused. It really is talking about deliverables, and it's very refreshing for someone who's not sort of local government through and through to see real actions and real quantifiable against which we can measure quantifiable results. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And this to me is a total breath of fresh air. This whole report, especially the progress report towards what we're doing on rough sleeping and homelessness strategy. To Councillor Barnes, I would say, yeah, I share your impatience somewhat, and I think we can both see that with Ben and Joe having to look at the wide picture, it needs someone chipping away in the background to say, you haven't forgotten about the prefabs, have you guys? It's not got lost in the big picture, and I assure you I do that on a regular basis. So I share your enthusiasm for it. I maybe do know, I was going to have the temerity to say I maybe do know a little more about the problems, but I'm sure I don't. I'm sure Councillor Barnes, both Councillor Barneses are well versed in those. But it's not for the want of mentioning. It won't go by because we didn't want to do it. And as I say, I will carry on prompting. But overall, I just think this report, this whole agenda item is so heartening. It really does show that we are making some progress. And once you make some progress, you can then see the way clear to making a bit more. So I'd like to congratulate the officers on the not just what they've done, but the way they've presented it and the enthusiastic way it's presented. So that's all I really want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Earl Williams.
Sorry. Sorry, I can't get my camera. Oh, there it is. I just wanted to talk about the on page 43, the empty homes item, because it says in here, and I found it a little bit worrying. We're talking about saying that if homes are empty, we're talking about enforcing owners to allow their property to be used. I don't like the idea of forcing anybody to do anything, and we don't know why some homes could be empty. It could be for emotional reasons. It could be they've got family abroad, and I don't see why they should have to give a reason. And I don't like, as I say, I just not happy with the word enforce. I think if we can give them good reasons as to why it might be beneficial for them to let them or whatever, that's fine. But I think that sounds a little bit strong. Thank you.
Okay, good point there, Deirdre. From a personal point of view, I think empty housing is abominable. To be honest, I think it's completely wrong. An empty house, if someone has a second home for holidays or whatever, then fine. But you hear of people who just have houses. Or have been left a house and they can't bring themselves to sell it or rent it or do anything. And I just think that is completely and utterly bonkers, to be honest. But that's me. Property is an income for me. Why you would ever want it empty, sitting there costing you money, I have no idea. And why people do it, again, I have absolutely no idea. I can't get my head around it. Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to refer to Councillor Barnes's projected overspend. We could have reduced the overspend on B&B by keeping people on the street. I think Joe Powell had the right priority by accommodating people, even if it resulted in an overspend. Now, I have 7 points, seven questions and/or comments I'd like to make in different parts of the paper, but I'll give way to Councillor Barnes if he wishes.
No, I'm happy to wait.
Yeah, you're there. You may as well crack on.
Okay, my first question is on page 41. That it says that there are two schemes in progress concerning community housing, totaling 38 affordable dwellings. There's Cemetery Lodge and there's Main Road, Icklesham. Could I ask what the progress is with Cemetery Lodge?
Who would that be, Ben?
That would be me, Chair, yeah. So we continue to work with an adjacent landowner to bring forward the two sites collectively, so that it's so that we get improved massing. The landowner's in discussion directly with the Community Land Trust at this point in time to establish that they take on the affordable element of that site and bring forward a joint application, including both plots of land.
Thank you. And what would the timeline for this be?
Dependent on the negotiations, obviously, but we're hoping to sort of bring forward a planning application next year. We're at sort of pre-app with planning at the moment, and we have appointed an architect.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciated. My second question is on page 46, concerning the floating housing support service. Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, I'll take that one. That's sorry. That's a county commissioned support service. So floating support service is a phrase that refers to the nature of how the support is delivered. So the support workers float they're not attached to a property. They go to people's houses or outreach. So it's a legacy actually from supporting people funding, which people may remember from a few decades ago, that we still are lucky enough in East Sussex to have retained some element of, and the county dedicate that to commissioning. I think it's approximately 90 support workers across the county who are dedicated to what's referred to as housing related support needs. So it's a very generic service tailored to the needs of different residents.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to commend you, Joe, on a number of achievements. The first is in establishing eviction protocols with social landlords, which I think is great. And I have a question arising from that, which is, have you begun receiving notice of potential evictions from private letting agents yet? Or is that something that's an aspiration at the moment?
Notorious is fraught with challenges, that aspiration. It is an aspiration. We're working with the private sector and with letting agents to improve our relationship with them. The challenge is that there is a dynamic where we have to support and advise residents as to their legal rights in terms of the Protection from Eviction Act and Housing Act, which can run counter to the, how do I phrase this, to the outcome that a landlord may wish to achieve, particularly if they have a difficult tenant who may not be paying their rent or may be willfully antisocial. That what we try and do is work with agents to reassure them that we want the same outcome. If a property is unaffordable for someone, or they're not managing to live there effectively and are causing, antisocial behaviour, the best outcome is for that tenancy to end. And while we need to work within the confines of the Protection from Eviction Act and the Housing Act, we try to work with landlords to move people on, rather than ahead of an official eviction date, so that they are suitably housed. But the principal challenge is that there is not necessarily, there's a counter incentive for agents and landlords sometimes to draw attention to the difficulty someone might be in if they feel we are going to extend the time in which they can remain in the tenancy.
Thank you. My next comments relate to your achievements, Joe, and I would like to commend these. The funding in place for HUG, the Homelessness Unity Group, to provide the shelter last winter, the 55 cases offered of private sector tenancies offered through the Rother Tenant Funder Service. The 27 former rough sleepers have been accommodated in 2021, and the Live, Work, Thrive project, which you've just launched. All great news, and I would like to express my appreciation for these.
Thank you, Paul. I'll just put in a thanks to my team, obviously, who've helped to deliver that, and particularly to the officers who are, just to remind members who I know are aware of the amount of strain and challenge they've had since well, generally in housing, but since the COVID pandemic as well. Lots of extra hours and lots of late nights, etc., trying to keep the thing afloat. So yes, they do. If you do get the time to thank them personally, I'd invite you to.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to do that. I've had quite a number of contacts with your team, and they've generally been extremely positive and resulted in very good outcomes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As a previous portfolio holder for housing, I obviously had a number of briefings, and one of the things I would certainly wish to comment on is the tenancy finder scheme, because we have a superb officer who's driving that, and we have achieved 55. And one of the things that pleased me about that was, well, a lot of the funding for the tenancy finance scheme has come from the money that we used to spend on providing deposits for people to go into very expensive private accommodation in the past, which very often that tenancy broke down because it's unaffordable to the people, and that money was very often wasted, and very often the person had to be rehoused again. So a lot of that funding now goes into this scheme. Obviously, the tenancy finance scheme is much more secure. It's reviewed after 12 months. It gets officer support. There's good relationships between the tenant and landlord, so it's less likely to fail. And also, when I first took on the portfolio, I was very distressed to find that we had temporary accommodation in places like Gillingham, and there were people in this area who found literally being broken up, and children were leaving their schools and losing their family contacts. So fantastic work has been done by our officers in getting people housed in Rother where they belong. And I was always very impressed and had great admiration for our officers because the amount of work they did on this. And also with the securing the properties, we now got 5 that started under my portfolio. And if you look back 18 months to where we were then and where we are now, and what we're achieving, even with the issues that COVID puts before us, I'm very, very pleased. And I think we've got a lot of respect and thanks for officers for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes, Mary Barnes.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. It was really just following a point that had been raised by Councillor Cortell. I wanted to really talk about or ask about rough sleepers, because recently we had a case in Robertsbridge of someone in the church porch. We often get someone in the church porch in Etchingham. And looking at the reports, there's not a lot of detail about how the funding agreement principle works. I see that we've got this homelessness unity group who obviously mastermind the care of these poor, unfortunate people. But what my concern is that I think they obviously are in need of very specialised care, because there is not one of the people that we've come across locally and out here in the rural area who is capable of living in a normal environment that we would know about. And obviously this must be something that is approached with enormous care. I just wonder, first of all, there's some reference to a funding agreement in place. First of all, whose is the funding, and do we contribute to that? And also, what about the ongoing care of these people? Are we responsible, or do we ask about how they are achieving any degree of normality after they have been garnered into this care? I'm just very concerned that when we get them, they are hardly, in some cases, hardly recognisable as people. It's just so awful to see them. And I'm really would just like a bit more information.
I'll attempt to give you a whistle-stop tour of a very complicated area. So that it's the funding picture in terms of services to vulnerable people is complex on its own. So that our main partners are the NHS, as you'd expect, mental health services, county social care services, mental health services, then the NHS mental health services. There's drug and alcohol services, which are county commissioned. There's public health services, which are county commissioned. So those are our principal partners, and we have a very distinct function as the housing provider and homelessness provider. Government have latterly and in recent years given us various forms of funding which have been increased in number. So there's a county service that we commissioned back in 2017 originally, that was is known as the Rough Sleeping Initiative, and that's over £1 million now in various pots of money coming forward and has recently has a psychiatrist attached to it. It has 2 nurses, 2 mental health nurses, social workers, and our own housing needs professional from Rotho within it, and from the other local housing authorities. And that's known as the multidisciplinary team. And that multidisciplinary team has drug and alcohol workers too. They are dedicated to this group. So they are the ones tasked with, as you put well, the challenges, Councillor Barnes, excuse me, the challenges of reaching this group and getting to a point where they can effectively engage with us. And then beyond that, there is a lesser service known as the rapid rehousing pathway, lesser in terms of the needs it's tailored towards, I should say, which takes people with less extreme needs. And then there's the main homework service, which I mentioned earlier, who also work with the more lighter touch, lower support need, rough sleepers at the other end of the spectrum. So where HUG fit in is they're a very localised service for rough sleepers and the street community. So they're really just trying to provide Bexhill principally with a hub more locally than in Hastings and Eastbourne, where rough sleepers can access essential services. It's essentially a gateway to the RSI, to our own housing needs service, and we're all using. So the idea is that the mental health service, housing, social care, NHS are using this RSI as our touch point, because we've proven to be completely ineffective, to be honest. We're trying to reach 95% of the population. And we do that fairly well. In terms of, you know, the average person that becomes homeless. This 5%, this multiple complex need group, are for everyone extremely difficult to reach, extremely expensive on services and the demand they have on services, and so it justifies the investment that way, because I think on average a rough sleeper costs the state £30,000 a year just from their use of services. So between 20 and 30,000. So it's money well spent, and providing effective results. But happy to talk to you any time about it in more detail, because as my colleagues will testament, it's difficult to shut me up once I start going on about it. So I'll stop now.
Yes, thank you very much, Joe. It's a tragic situation for them, and I'm so pleased that so much is being done for their care. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne, you wish to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a couple of things. First of all, you can see the amount of care that Joe and his team and the whole of Rother put into not just doing the numbers game, not just saying we've got this person off the street and put them somewhere, but trying to make sure that the tenancy they get is sustainable and they have the support services wrapped around them. And as Joe's just outlined, it's a very fragmented service. Lots of Joe's work, I'm sure, is pulling together the various sources of funding, the various teams that can help. Now, we've had an example of that tonight. We have 3 people presenting on this strategy. We have Richard Parker Harding, we have Ben Hook, and we have Joe Powell. Now, that should tell you something about the fact that there's a danger there of things slipping down the cracks. And certainly, I think if the portfolio holder has any role in this, is trying to make sure that that does not happen and helping when it comes to making sure people are in contact with each other. I'd like just to give a quick name check to Councillor Charlie Clark, who left me a portfolio in very good condition and with good relationships with the officers. So I did inherit a lot of goodwill when I came into the portfolio. But as I say, it is such a difficult area, and it does require, it's multidimensional, as you can see. But I think sometimes it's multidimensional where it doesn't need to be, and perhaps we can do some jobs shortening those lines of communication. And as I say, if in the short term a portfolio holder's got any role in just making sure that people are talking to each other, then that's how I see it. So that's really all I want to say. It's just another pat on the back for everyone involved in this area in RDC. I think it's all going in the right direction, and they're trying to tackle as best they can a very, very difficult problem.
Thank you. Councillor Cortell, you've got a raised hand.
I'm sorry, I was just raising my hand to approve what Councillor Mary Barnes had said.
Okay. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to add my thanks to both Ben Hook, Joe Powell and Richard Parker Harding. And I'd like to ask them to thank their teams for not just a detailed report, but for their positive attitude in bringing this to the committee, their aims in Appendix C, which I commend that we should forward to Cabinet as in Resolution 1. I do think we should take point of Councillor Barnes's comments and would ask that perhaps a consideration could be given to an investigation into searches for sites in both rural areas as well as our towns and funding for the purchase of Councillor Barnes's prefabricated homes. And furthermore, under recommendation 3, I look forward to the review of the housing, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy that we can hear in 2021 to find out how we've helped all our residents who've been affected by this pandemic.
Thank you. Am I assuming that you're moving the recommendation there?
I am indeed.
Okay. Councillor Barnes, you've got a hand up now.
Yes, Chairman, before we, I'm happy in a sense to second that recommendation, but before we actually move on, I really have a number of other comments. I'll try and be as brief as possible. It seems to me, apart from the build-out problem, which is more a problem for government than us, we identified on the Housing Task Force 3 quite distinct problems. There was the problem really, which I'll put in inverted commas as rough sleeping. It goes much wider than that. We've talked about that a lot tonight. I'll take Councillor Cortell's remark about putting people on the streets as black humour. Frankly, I want to put an end to homelessness by putting people in better accommodation than bed and breakfast and more permanent accommodation. But on rough sleeping, we are really, thanks to our team, making very substantial progress indeed. In some ways, it will be useful, I think, now to disaggregate that strategy from the other 2. It is a very distinct problem, and we've actually made very substantial progress and will continue to make progress on it. The funding is good. There are problems of coordination, and I was grateful for what Councillor Byrne said. But it seems to me that one of the 3 problems that we identified on the Housing Task Force, that one, intractable though it is, has made the most substantial progress. Secondly, there is homelessness, where you haven't got those kinds of vulnerabilities and problems. And there, clearly, we need to do something both on the rented side and I think in various other ways. And I do think that both the scheme that the council adopted last year to actually buy some properties, but prefabrication may be the answer. But the problem which seems to me that we're least far advanced is what I call concealed homelessness. I was somewhat distressed to see us say there isn't much demand. The truth is that every time I drive around housing estates, both in town or in the country, I see huge numbers of motor cars outside houses because we have multi-layered households, multi-generational households, not because they want to be multi-generational. I live in one, and there are advantages to them, but there are all kinds of concealed households, and there's a great deal of concealed homelessness, and it's simply, we have no way of channeling that so it manifests itself to us. But to play down the problem seems to me wrong, and I'm a bit worried. I'll go through very quickly some of the things I noted. On page 35, we've set a target of 100 for affordable houses. That's roughly 20.6% of our target when our policy is 40. Why have we set the target so low? On page 39, we say we're going to publish a housing land supply and housing trajectory every 6 months on our website, but the only one that we reference on page 39 is April 2019. By my calculations, we should actually have 2 more in print by now and be coming up to our 3rd. These aren't meant to be destructive criticisms. They're simply highlighting just how much is still out there to be done. And we've got a team to do it, but I think we do need to set realistic targets. I won't talk more about build out because I don't think that is altogether within our control, apart from making sure that in the new core strategy we allocate sufficient sites. But clearly we are falling behind quite badly still on our targets. On CLTs, and I welcome the earlier remarks, but are we marketing those to parish councils? Because it seems to me there is money out there from the government. That is something we could be talking with parish councils on. It seems to me landowners might be more willing to bring their sites to a parish council than they are to bring them to us. And I'd like a date for the housing needs survey. I'd also like in some ways to make sure that on exception sites, that in the new core strategy, they are credited to the parishes instead of being a separate, rather wide target, because I think that would also incentivize the parishes to bring them forward. I'd like to know a little more about where we're going with the mortgage scheme. I have a willing seller of a shared housing, a willing buyer, but because of the terms of the Section 106, no mortgage. So if we could do something to bridge that gap, we would actually bring together a willing buyer and a willing seller, and the deposit is there, it's getting the mortgage. So page 54, that mortgage scheme needs to become a target, and it isn't really a target at the moment. Finally, 2 more really. It seems to me that insulation has got to be a very big retrospective action. And I think we need to separate that out and give it a target. It does seem to me that on page 57, given the government's green initiative, we've set our targets rather low. And finally, on page 61, there is a target there which we have achieved, but in a sense, it doesn't mean it should be removed because it should be the foundation stone for going further forward. So what we need there to do is not just to remove the target that's been achieved, but to set an updated target. And I'd like to see that in the appendix of the new targets. I've been very brief on that, Chairman. They're all intended to be constructive, not destructive, because I am well aware of the enormous amount that our team have done. It's just, I think, we need to keep our ambition up.
Thank you, Ben. Joe, I assume you've taken all that in.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot there, Chairman, that we need to take on board. So maybe it's worth a further conversation with Councillor Barnes offline to make sure we've captured all of his points there.
Okay, right. Well, we've been moved and seconded. Louise, are you happy with the recommendation that Councillor Cook put forward with the additives?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, are we ready to go to the vote then?
Yep. Okay, thank you. Councillors, I will call your names out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against or abstain. Once your name has been called, switch on your microphone only to vote. If you do not answer after your name has been called twice or contact is lost, members will be recorded as abstaining. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Carroll.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Mrs Cook.
For.
Councillor Cortell.
For.
Councillor Mrs Earl Williams.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Maynard.
For.
Councillor Mooney.
For.
And Councillor Osborne.
For.
That's unanimous, so carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, it took a bit of time, but as was said at the beginning of that agenda item, it's a very important item, possibly one of the most important ones that we deal with. So there it is. We've done it, and thank you very much. So, agenda item 7, moving on. Performance report, second quarter. Ben, you get all the good gigs.
Don't know, just. Thank you, Chairman. So members find attached the report on the corporate performance under the KPIs for the second quarter of 2021. You will note that we are beating or exceeding targets on 3 out of the stated targets. I think, I mean, you know, without putting it too bluntly, I think the performance indicators this year are always going to be come with an asterisk of as yet unknown impact by COVID-19. I think that's particularly pertinent to homelessness prevention. Obviously, we're yet to see the full effects of that as to when the government lifts its moratorium on evictions. We are yet to see the full impact on our return on net income from our investment assets. The data that's provided is the expected income at this stage rather than necessarily the true income. And the obviously income such as things like car parks in particular will be significantly down on our projections, with little hope, if I'm honest with you, of recovery at this stage. So the report is as presented, and the outcomes are as they are. I think with every single one at this stage, we take that pinch of salt, just to say, you know, as yet undetermined the full impact of the COVID-19 crisis and how that might impact the year-end turnout for all of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I think looking at them, you know, we've got sort of the red dots, the yellow triangles, and the green tick. The yellow triangles says warning, but it's actually meeting the target. So I think that's to be fair. And if you look at if you actually sort of, you know, read through some of the indicators, you know, missed bins, you know, 125 and our target's 120. So we're not a million miles away, and given the positions we're in, I think we're pretty good. And personally, and when I go to parish council meetings, nobody's sort of kicking up about missed bins. I think we have one road completely missed in Iden for some inexplicable reason. They just come back a day later and done them. So, you know, I don't think we need to beat ourselves up too much. Others might have a different opinion. Anybody got anything to say? It looks all pretty quiet. It looks very quiet. I think. Councillor Cortell, you messed it up.
Sorry, Chair, I was a bit slow tapping my name in. The waste and recycling area were a bit low on recycling. Can I ask whether there are any plans for users of shopping streets to be able to recycle. I know it's a problem in the centre of Bexhill, and I have a friend who tells me it's a problem on Battle High Street.
I'll field that. I'll try to. Can I just confirm which group you mean, Councillor Cortell? Sorry, do you mean business owners?
No, I mean residential recycling.
On commercial
streets where there are flats intermingled with shops.
Yes, we have a recycling in operation for those areas using pink sacks, as far as I understand it.
Right. And where are they supposed to put these pink sacks?
Well, they can put them out on the street. Should we take this offline to discuss?
Okay.
Is it in your ward you're concerned about
that? Thank you.
Is it in your ward specifically you're concerned about that, Councillor?
In my ward and another ward.
Yeah, well, I'll take that offline and discuss with you the detail.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in Rye, in the sort of what we call the citadel of Rye, there's still just a black sack collection. There's no recycling because there's no place to put multiple wheelie bins, which is a shame, but there it is. I think sometimes they did go for a stage of like a large black recycling bag, but they ended up being tied to lampposts and everything else, and it didn't look very nice. I don't know if they're still in operation or not, but there it is. Probably similar to what Councillor Cortell's mentioned. Councillor Barnes, it doesn't say specific on which one, so I'll say it must be John.
Chairman, I'm very sympathetic to the problem of the officers in some ways. We probably ought to have suspended a lot of targets given the COVID emergency. And so, in a sense, I'm going to focus only on one problem, which is really build-out rates. It was my understanding that building was not one of the industries that was closed. We have a fairly disastrous situation looming where it looks as if we're going to build, have built. I say have built because it's not our responsibility yet, and this is one of the reasons we've established the housing company. But it looks as if the build-out rate on the two sites which are our principal source of supply, is going to be about 20 houses this year. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is the intention then is that the sites will build out at a rate of about 100 houses a year. Now, I can understand what the developers are about, but it does seem to me that we need to find whatever tools we have to try to increase that build-out rate. And I have to say I was quite struck by the fact that a good Tory like our MP is beginning to mutter about compulsory purchase in some circumstances. It does seem to me the oligopoly that dominates the building industry is actually now part of the problem, and possibly the Competition and Markets Authority should be looking at them. That said, what can we do? Well, we've done one thing with the building company, but another area which we could explore, and I put this forward for discussion, is whether we can work with small builders who build out fast to see if we can address some of their problems with capital. In other words, could we use our new housing company to work in partnership with small builders who have every incentive to build out their sites rapidly? The other thing which I think we desperately need to do, we've made a call for site on the DASA, but we do need to convene the landowners forum that we talked about at the Housing Task Force to see if we can generate more buildable sites for the housing company. So constructive suggestions, I hope, for addressing what is a looming problem, because 20, frankly, goes nowhere near our present target or anything that the government is likely to set.
Thank you. I will say that, well, construction was stopped probably from end of March, probably April and May. Most builders merchants were also closed because I couldn't get anything. And then they reopened slowly with click and collect and messing about like that. They're all open now. There was a stage back in the summer you couldn't buy plasterboard and you couldn't buy plaster. And now I was spoken to a plumber last week and you can't get certain makes of oil boiler because they haven't manufactured the burners. So there's always a shortage that's sort of running around, but that doesn't, well, I suppose it stops you finishing a house, you haven't got a boiler. Ben, you wanted to come in.
Well, you sort of stole my thunder there, Chairman. I was just going to say that with regards to the building industry, a lot of large sites shut down, and when they did reopen, there was significant problems with supplies, materials, and new working practices under COVID restrictions. So that's probably the key. Thing that's slowed delivery of those houses on those sites that Councillor Barnes mentioned.
Yeah, I know currently they're trying to get as much finished as possible because you've got the stamp duty holiday, I think, to the end of January. So a lot of people are rushing to try and get places finished so that people can move in and not pay the stamp duty. So, but who knows? Anyone else on this one, or are we happy to? We've got it resolved. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary. Was there actions there you wanted to include, Councillor Barnes, or?
Go on. What actions?
Sorry,
Can you say that again?
Yeah, we got here, resolve Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary. You're the only one who's spoken, so have you got any actions you wish to recommend to Cabinet or not?
I didn't hear that.
Right. What recommendations, based on what you've just said, do you wish to go to Cabinet?
Oh, I think the two things which I would like to see picked up are whether, and they're really for Alliance Homes to some extent as much as Cabinet. One is exploring partnership with small builders, particularly around any problems they have with capital. That's one I really think we should pick up at the moment. I listened to Ben on the builders' problems, fine, but I think we need to keep a careful eye on what's going on because the build-out rate problem is getting worse rather than better. I think everybody knows that. What we do about it is a very different matter. I don't think we can make a recommendation at the moment, but Vicky Cook said very firmly on the last item, I think we do need to keep the housing position under active review at Overview and Scrutiny, and we do get quarterly reports which allow us to do that.
Okay, Ben, you wish to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to thank Councillor Barnes for his points. Might just be worth me taking them offline with him rather than sending them up as recommendations to Cabinet at this point, and then maybe sort of determine some key actions that we can bring forward maybe at the next report.
Okay, good idea. Do we have someone to move the recommendation as printed then? Vicky? Thank you. And a seconder? Who am I looking at? Councillor Cortell. Thank you. Louise, do you want to do a roll call on this, or do you just sort of do a gentle nod?
If it's just a report for noting, Chairman, then there's no need for a roll call.
Okay, well, unless anybody's unhappy, I'll take that as moved. Okay, and seconded and passed. Right. no one's saying otherwise, so I'll go with that. Thank you very much. Agenda item 8, medium-term financial plan. Yeah, Robin.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, an uplifting report for members towards the back end of your meeting. This report actually went to Cabinet at the beginning of the month, and it covers a number of things, and that includes the 5-year financial forecast itself, a commitment to carrying on with our council tax reduction scheme for next year, obviously recognising that the outcome of the work of the Anti-Poverty Task and Finish Group may change the scheme for 2022. Continuing to be a member of the East Sussex Business Rate Pool, which hopefully will bring us additional income for the council over the next 5 years. How we're going to use our bonus grant in the future, and particularly to reduce the call on reserves in balance budget, if that's possible, if the bonus grant continues beyond the next couple of years. And the new capital programme is also included in this report for you tonight. Just in terms of the actual financial forecast, I think the underlying issue is one of uncertainty over future government grant funding, and the uncertainty over the long-term impact of the pandemic on local jobs and our local economy, and how that then affects us as the council. The report itself highlights a number of the cost pressures, including homelessness, which we already discussed tonight, and the long-term risk, I think, to our arts and leisure services, which are currently needing substantial financial support so that they remain viable. And what we don't know at this stage is how long that might need to continue. Within the report, we show a number of work streams that really build on what we did in the ROTHA 2020 programme at the moment. And then cover a number of things that over the next few months we're going to have to work up with members into a detailed programme of work. And I think, though, even with these work streams, the forecast does show that we're going to use a substantial part of our reserves to support services. And we estimate the reserves will fall from around 13 million in April 21 down to 3.5 million over those 5 years. And this is on top of the reserves that we're going to need to use in order to balance the budget, which is, as you know, due to COVID and hasn't been entirely covered by government grant to date. Hopefully we'll get some more government grant in and that will cover it, but at the moment we're projecting that there will be a shortfall this year. The report also presents the latest capital programme at Appendix C to the report. And you can see that now the programme in total is quite significant in value, particularly in terms of developing new business space and new homes for our community. This level of investment does come with risks, but also opportunities. And what we need to do is minimise the risk of failure and maximise that return to the council where we can. So overall, the financial forecast shows what a difficult financial position the council's in. It's not unusual, obviously, in local government, and we're all aware of that, but it is a situation that we can't ignore. And we do need to start delivering on the ideas that will generate the more income and reduce our costs ongoing. So, I say it's a difficult situation that we find ourselves in, difficult financial climate. But obviously we need to put in place those plans and actions in order to balance the budget going forward. Happy to answer any questions members may have.
Okay, thank you. I'll start, if you don't mind. In sort of, you touched on it a bit in 27 and 28, the sort of capital programme. I think we've mentioned it before, it's large. So I just wanted to make sure that you, as a professional, are happy with it. And the only sort of the concern, and I'm sure you wrote it, so you'll have the concern, is that we're going to be borrowing a lot of money, which we've got to pay back, I assume. But somewhere else, we sort of by 2024, I think we sort of run out of reserves. But in 28, it says we need to maintain sufficient reserves to mitigate risks. So how do we sort of square that circle? Or is that what you mentioned earlier about waiting on confirmation of government grant and stuff like that?
Chairman, You're right in the sense that that level of uncertainty for the council with the government support, the uncertainty over how the business rates sharing will go on in the future, etc., all adds to our risk in terms of the financials. So what we're looking at in terms of our capital investment is things that will deliver a net positive return to the council, either through capital receipt, through the disposal of properties, or through a rental return, in order to meet the borrowing costs plus contribute towards the council's bottom line. So what I'm trying to highlight is that obviously the scale of it is substantial. However, the council is in a good position in order to meet the cost of that. If something failed, and that's why I was talking about the risk of failure, if something failed and we were left with a sizable debt, then we're going to have some difficulties in terms of meeting that debt unless the assets are sold. And I think as long as we've got that in our minds, that assets will have to be sold where needed, and we may take a loss. There is that risk that we will take a loss, but hopefully that will be sufficiently small in order for us to be able to manage if that actually occurred. So I'm highlighting that there's quite a substantial change in the risk profile for the authority. It's gone from a few years ago of no borrowing at all to quite a substantial level of borrowing. Some of that will be short term, particularly around the housing development, because the intention is to dispose of the housing at the end of development. So that should be a fairly high turnover in terms of that income coming back into the authority and reducing the overall indebtedness of the authority. But it is something we need to keep our control of, and something we need to keep an eye on going forward. Thank you.
Okay. What have I got? Councillor Barnes, Mary Barnes, I think.
Yeah, just thank you, Chairman. Just following on from Robin's explanation, is the development of offices at North, is that right? The offices at 45 million. I'm no economist, so I actually enlisted the help of my grandson, who's a stockbroker. And I said, OK, you have 45 million and it brings you 230,000 a year. What's the actual percentage return? And he said, it's 0.5%. So he said, crikey, that's not very big, is it? And I said, no. He said, well, actually, it is a bit of a risk. And I thought I'd pass this on because he said, so many of us now are working from home that the future of office, working from an office, is very much in doubt, because these very large companies with huge overheads, particularly if they have a property in the middle of London, but that could be a huge saving for them. And I'm considerably concerned that if we go ahead with it, and I don't know at what point we've got with it, we could actually have quite a risk on our hands. And I'm just a bit fearful about it. I think it is a big amount of money with very, very little return. I'd just like to hear what Robin thinks about that one.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'll probably start the answer, but I'll probably find that Ben will want to come in and provide some colour to it as well. But in essence, the deal we do, and this is what it comes down to, the deal we do needs to ensure that there's a level of security with that lease on that property. And the type of industry that we're relating to will have a long-term need to have a long-term lease with the authority over 20 years. And obviously rental incomes, the whole point of the rental income proposal is that it increases over every 5 years as well. So the level of return in our calculations is somewhere north of 3%. I'll hand over to Ben in case he wants to add some specific detail to that. Ben.
Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I mean, just in regards to the specific development that we're talking about, I think we've got to be clear that the figures provided by Councillor Mrs. Barnes are, net of borrowing. So that's what we would expect to receive net of having paid off our borrowing costs in relation to this development. And the other thing is that is a starting point in terms of the rental income that will be generated, and it will be increasing over a period of years in line with industry standard practice, whereas our outgoings will remain static throughout that period. So in cash terms, so we overall over a period of years, the income that's generated through that development increases quite significantly as we go down the line. The other point to note is that obviously the council's position on this is as much as it is to generate income, the economic benefit of this project is one of the key drivers to it. It's about creating jobs, it's about retaining jobs, and it's about ensuring that there's career prospects for people growing up in the area into the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mooney.
Thank you very much indeed. Page 92, continuing on to page 93, item C. It begins with leisure, swimming pools, that one. Yeah. You haven't stated a figure in the budget for that item.
Chairman, at the moment, obviously, we don't know what the long-term impact is on those two services. So that'll be the Delaware Pavilion and their Freedom Leisure, who operate our leisure and swimming centres. So negotiations are ongoing with them in terms of this year's financial support, and next financial year, we don't know what the position is at the moment, because we don't know whether obviously things will change as a result of the vaccination programmes, etc., that are going to be going on coming into Easter. So we're keeping optimistic that the level of support will not be needed. There is a line within the forecast for Freedom Leisure, and that's an initial line for additional costs, but we're hoping from those figures that we've included in the forecast.
So it is included in the budget, is it?
There is an element for Freedom Leisure, as I understand, in the forecast, but we're expecting that, we're hoping that doesn't actually come out at that level and we can reduce it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a different situation. I think the more worry, I think, in terms of not having any provision for, will be the Delaware Pavilion if
Indeed.
things are back to normal and they can't operate and open their doors.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, if you had to make it, if a decision had to be made, because you've got you're between the devil and the deep blue sea, you have that situation. Is it ongoing, or is it going to wipe its face, etc.? But you also have the business of the capital program, because you have items there that you might have to prune a bit going forward.
Yeah, obviously anything we do and agree as part of budget setting is subject to review depending on the overall council's financial situation. So if it deteriorates beyond what we are forecasting, then yes, we would have to make some decisions around deferrals or stopping programmes of work if we cannot no longer afford those.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much indeed. That's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by commenting on what Councillor Mary Barnes' concern about the £45 million investment. I took up an hour of Robin Venard's time before voting in favour of that investment. So I did have initial concerns along the lines of what Mary was fearing. I think I'd like to say a couple of things in favour of this project. The first is that if we lost the business concerned, we would be losing 1,000 jobs in Bexhill. It would devastate the local economy. And the second thing is that we'd be tied into the company would be tied into a long lease of at least 20 years, which would safeguard us against the company moving on till at least the year 2040. Now, moving on to my points. On page 92, I notice that there's a decrease of 3% applied to the overall cost of salaries to allow for staff turnover. Is it because there's a reasonable assumption that 3%, at least 3% of positions are going to be vacant, posts are going to be vacant at any particular time?
Chairman, I think this is based upon previous experience, if you like, in terms of the overall vacancy levels that the councils, enjoyed, if you like, for want of a better word. But yeah. So we try to reflect that back into the budget. It is a risk line because obviously if we become fully employed and all vacancies are gone, then we're going to overspend by that amount. So it is a risk, but it is based upon our historic sort of trend in terms of vacancies.
Thank you, Robin. My second question's on page 95. The income from off-street car parks. You forecast an additional income of 150,000 a year as a result of CPE. Do you feel that that is, again, a safe assumption? The reason I'm asking is that car parks are looking pretty empty at the moment, but I realise that could be as a result of lockdown.
That's right, and I think what we have seen is usage has gone up in our car parks during the period before the latest lockdown. So again, we need to keep it under review and monitor what performance is like coming up for next year. But the projection is based upon what we know, that we think usage is going to increase. We think that's hopefully a reasonable estimate of what that increased usage will turn out to be. But clearly, as I was saying, the level of uncertainty about COVID, that may mean that the projections that we've produced for this forecast will need to be revised and changed by the time we get into February, by the time we set the budget. And obviously, if we reduce that level of income, then that just increases the financial gap the authority has got.
Yeah, the thing is, we've just increased the price in some cases from £0 to £325 a year for a parking fee. Surely that is likely, underlyingly, to decrease the quantity of cars using the car park rather than increase.
Yeah, I mean, this was based upon the work and the changes in the new charges that have been introduced. Yes, there will be more people doing the long-term or the resident permit type approach, but this is what we're currently estimating is the likely increase based upon what we've seen and based upon the forecast for numbers of both permits and also fee charging or fee paying people using the car parks. As I said, it is an estimate at the end of the day, so we have to watch it and we have to monitor, the impact of CPE and how it affects our car parks over the next year at least, in order to get a new baseline. Because at the end of the day, this is an estimate, but we do need to understand our new baseline going forward and how that affects into our car park income. Yeah, I just reiterates the uncertainty, I think, in terms of our financial forecast at the moment.
Thank you.
Joe, you wish to come in?
Yeah, it's just to support Robin's comments really, and I think just to mention a task and finish group that's looking at off-street car parking and will feed into and provide Robin with more intelligence and data, and also for members will be able to make a decision on what they see as being the appropriate level of charging in that context. So that might be the appropriate forum to talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I was going to say exactly the same, actually. We've only had one meeting, give us a chance. Councillor Barnes, I think I've got Barnes multiple here, so I'll just say Councillor Barnes and I have to fight it out.
First, John Barnes. I wanted to take stock of what is an extremely difficult situation, and I don't envy anybody trying to even begin to think about a budget in these circumstances. What I do think and want to approve is the way we've actually switched the capital budget to borrowing. I think while low interest rates are prevailing, that's a very sensible move. The longer we can preserve our reserves in the current situation, the better. That said, we have £10 million producing a reasonable income so far, and we want to try to be as prudent as we can before we start eating into that kind of reserve. Obviously, house building helps because we get rates, council tax from houses. So again, I'm sorry to bang on about housing so much tonight, but in a number of ways we could be helping ourselves. I think when we're looking at addressing the housing problem, as retail becomes slightly under threat from post-COVID patterns, I think we need to look to convert certainly the upper stories of some of our retail businesses into housing pretty fast. I don't think you can entirely rely on the private sector to do that fast enough. So again, on the agenda of our new housing company, we should be looking at that, remembering the return will not be just on any rent we get or any sale, but we will actually be boosting our council tax revenue. And it does seem to me we've got to pay attention to our revenues because at the end of the day, nobody wants to cut services, and there is a statutory minimum beyond which we cannot go.
Thank you. So I'm assuming now Mary Barnes.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Councillor Cortell for his assurance that he too was slightly concerned about the purchase of that very large office block. But I would suggest that, because I am worried, that I think that after COVID, that a lot of things will change, and I think working in an office is probably one of them, that it might be prudent from time to time just to ask that company how many people are actually present and working in those offices, as opposed to how many are working from home. Because I hope we're not in for a horrible shock. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon, you're the portfolio holder. Do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would, and thank you for the very good discussion we've had again on this matter. Never quite understand the order of things. It's gone to cabinet first, then to scrutiny. Normally it's the other way around, but anyway. Just a few comments. I mean, part of our income generation is the property investment strategy started by the previous administration, which we're carrying on, and of course it does carry risk. There's no two ways about it, but I'd like to think that everything that we've bought and we are investing in is low risk, and everything as well that we're investing in is in the district, which is very, very important for the economy of the district as well. Councillor Mrs Barnes, I think, actually answers some of her own queries in a way, because she mentions that it's becoming unattractive to work in big London offices, and I would totally agree with that. What will become more attractive is smaller offices in places where it's nice to live, it's cheaper to live, and it's nice to work with a workforce on your doorstep. So I would hope that actually Rother and Bexhill will be a place that will actually benefit from the downsizing of London offices. And I think we need to be well positioned and well ready for that shift in demographic and dynamics of an office industry. I don't think it's any secret that we still need to find big savings on a year-to-year basis so that we can equal our income and our outgoings. And as a ballpark figure, I still think it's £500,000 a year we need to find, and that's either in increased income or stopping doing some things and stop spending money on what we're doing at the moment. So there's some big decisions still to come, and we do know that work needs to start very quickly on that. I've just made sorry out of order. I do think that a lot of our risks, our investments that we've made are far less riskier than other authorities have. And you read some quite horror stories of the millions and billions that have been spent by some local authorities. We're not in that league, and everything that we've purchased has got a purpose, a future, and is currently getting an income. Councillor Cortell's questions about CPE and income from car parks are a little confusing. Anything that was a zero that we weren't charging for now and we are now charging for has surely got to be an increase in income. So we will increase our income. We agreed at Cabinet as well for an increase in car park incomes and rates at Canberra, which I think most of the councillors have been asking for with some of the increased costs there. So we should get a better rate, a better return from Canberra. And everyone says that 2021 will be a year of staycations, people holidaying in this country. So again, we're well placed at Canberra to increase our car parking income, providing, of course, the sun does shine. And Councillor Barnes, I totally agree with your aspirations and hopes for the housing company. I really think that's going to be some great things. And indeed, we're looking for some income as well. So that can only add to the balance sheet. Apart from that, thank you very much for a very good discussion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, if there's no one else, I haven't got anybody else who I don't think wishes to speak. We're down to report being noted. Do I need to move in a second to Louise? You have to remind me. Getting late.
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yep. Councillor Cook, can I look towards you as a mover?
It's better than being a shaker. I will quite happily move to recommend this report.
Thank you. And shall I look to Councillor Mooney as a seconder, as he's an accountant?
Yes, indeed. Yes, you read my mind perfectly. Thank you.
Excellent. We don't need the roll call vote, do we, Louise?
No, that's right.
So if everybody's in favour, could you have a little bit of a head nodding or something? Yeah, that'll do. Good. Okay, thank you very much. That's passed. Agenda item 9 is the work programme. Obviously today is done. Next one, 25th of next year. That was 2020, if anyone missed it. Draft revenue budget proposals and key performance targets and revenue budget capital programme monitoring Q2. So that's that. Progress on the environment strategy in March. Report of the anti-poverty task and finish group. I've had a request that goes to the 26th of April, which I don't have a problem with. And I'm assuming is, what's his name? I forgot his name now. Sam Coleman. Is he still here?
I am still here, Chair.
Are you happy? You're the chairman of that group. Sam, are you happy with that to move to April?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just because of the amount of workload that Joe's had and obviously our staff have had because of the pandemic, we want to make sure that we get our anti-poverty strategies and such right. Yeah. And we don't want a rushed strategy. So I think that gives us an extra month to get it right.
That's what I was thinking. That's right then. So we're happy with that. Yeah, so in April we'll have the report of the task and finish group on car parks, possibly. We will have the report of the anti-poverty task and finish group. Items for consideration, regeneration including leisure centre, fountain, skate park. I've got here green spaces. For some reason I wrote down green spaces. I don't know if that was that you, Vicky?
Yes, that was my recommendation. I wanted to add the accessibility of green spaces across the district under the regeneration, because I think it's really important.
Okay. Apart from that, anybody else got any views, or are we happy with it as it is? Well, I'll take that as quiet, so we're all happy then. So, well, if that's the case, I'll thank you for your time this evening. I'll check the clock. It's 25 past 8, so it's just under 2 hours. So that's not bad going. So thank you, everybody, for your attendance.
Thank you.